It's now saying it's live. So hello everyone. Sorry about the technical hold up. Hopefully, um, the stream will start any second. And we are live. Hello everybody. Really sorry about the small technical details there at the beginning. We'll just give people a second just to rejoin, and then we'll get going in just a second. Andy, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Andy Powell. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a specialist medical accountant, and I've just been helping Tony in developing and testing his modeler over the past couple of weeks.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let's go to Andy. Hopefully, people will join now. The link is working. So, just by way of kind of introductions, I'm Tony Goldstone. I'm a radiologist up in East Yorkshire, and have been kind of immersed in the pensions world probably for 9 years now. Almost by accident is kind of how it started. 10 years ago, I hadn't actually heard of the annual allowance. And then a colleague came in with a brown envelope, and I vaguely remembered that I'd had one the year before, which I'd filed. And then the following day, mine landed on the doormat, and as they say, the rest is history. And because I had a big problem with my own annual allowance when that landed, and I was fairly young, I think I was 40 when I got my first charge, or 41. I could see straight away that it was going to be a big problem for the NHS if consultants were having to limit work or not want to progress, etc. For fear of taxation. So I've spent a lot of time doing modelling, initially some kind of free modelling with the NUK, and then I did a modeller for the BMA Goldstone modeller that was used for many years. And basically every year I've done a tax tool to help people kind of try and fumble their way through it if they didn't want to turn to advice. And whilst they've been massively used, I did one last Christmas because of the mess around the administration with 2324 that was downloaded 10,000 times. It's really problematic to try and do things like version control if you're doing it with a downloadable tool. And so what I've developed is a tool that's kind of an interactive web tool that people can kind of go back to their numbers. But if there's a change in tax, for example, in the budget in a few weeks' time, we can make all those changes in the background, and there's no need to kind of do downloads and copying and pasting, etc. So that's me, and I'm really pleased to have Andy Powell with me. I'll let Andy introduce himself, but me and Andy go back a long way with kind of trying to sort out pension tax matters, because obviously with kind of my BMA role, and but even before the BMA, with Andy's ASMA role, we've both kind of been putting up the good fight to try and bring around pension tax changes. But Andy, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll head into the modeler?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Andy Powell. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a specialist medical accountant. I've been advising doctors now for over 30 years, and I have to say I've been doing annual allowance more than Tony has. It's even further back from when Tony got involved. And equally like him, we've shared views over the years about how disastrous this is being for the NHS. And it's not gone away, which is the frustrating bit. So I've been helping Tony over the last few weeks, just checking some of the new modeler over, doing a bit of testing for him. And I'll be talking about some of the GP angles when we go through the talk tonight.
Yeah, so the first bit of good news is that in all the modelers previously I've done, there's been really quite large groups of exclusions because they're just in the kind of too difficult to self-model camps. But I think we've got round most of those problems, and so the modeler that I'm going to show you this evening, and that is going to include both free components or paid components, is going to include many more people than previous modelers. So most people that are kind of worried by annual allowance are in the 1995 or the 2008 schemes, and they were been in them since before 2012, so they've been caught up in this whole McLeod issue. And then it was kind of the interaction of those schemes with the 2015 scheme that caused real problems and mayhem for annual allowance. But because of GP administration issues, I'd never previously done any GP pension modelling that was released, apart from kind of very specific tools. So there was a big problem with very high inflation with something called CPI disconnect. So, did a tool for that to try and influence government to change that ridiculous policy, and thank God they did, because that would have caused big problems for GPs in particular in those very high inflation years, being basically just taxed for inflation, which would have been ridiculous. So this is going to include anyone who's an active member of the 1995, 2008 or the 2015 scheme, and also for the first time ever including people who were just in 2015, and also that kind of group that are kind of were caught in the middle and weren't McLeoded, so people that have got a bit of 2008 service between 2012 and 2015. So pension administration in all of the nations is in a bit of a mess. I probably don't need to tell anyone on the stream about that. But even if it wasn't in a mess, and if pension administration worked to the timetable it was meant to be, i.e. you got a pension saving statement in October after the tax year closed, that doesn't help you plan, because to be able to plan, you've really got to know what your growth is in the year that you're currently in, as well as know all the previous years to be able to work out what your carry forward position is. So we've kind of got a position at the moment where very few people have got 2022 or 23 statements, or 23, 24 or 24, 25 statements. Lots of people haven't even got an RPSS, which goes up to the 22, 23 tax year. So that means their kind of information is 10 years out of date, which makes any sort of planning completely impossible. But if you want to plan for the current year, it's really important to know what your current year is. So this modeler covers the years that it's been a bit of a disaster. So that's the 23-24, the 24-25, and then the current year, which people won't be getting till next October if the scheme have sorted themselves out by then. Probably worth saying that to really get the best out of this modeler, you do need to understand what your post RPSS position is. And I know from serial FOIs that there's literally tens of thousands of those brown envelopes that have been sent out allegedly and haven't been acted on. So if you're sat on a brown envelope, please do get it processed, and you can get the costs for that back, and there's a link through there. I got an association with a big firm of accountants called Forwards Mazars, who Andy used to work for, and they can process it for you for free, because you're going to need the numbers that come out of that at the end to know your carry forward position, to be able to work out kind of the 3 years after the remedy period in the 22-23 tax year. So let's just head into the modeler. And we've got just a demo consultant in at the moment. So I'm just going to talk you through the demo consultant in the 1995 scheme, and then Andy will talk through a GP scenario, and I'll come back and do another consultant in the 2008 scheme. But for simplicity, we're going to use the same numbers, so the same pay profile for all three. So the first bit in the modeler is to try and work out which of the kind of four main groups are you in. So were you in the scheme before 31st of March 2012? And if you are, if you were then and you are now, and at any time in between, you're eligible for McLeod. So these top two are people that are eligible for McLeod, and including people that have got a 1995 statement, or including people that have got a 2008 statement and pension. As I said, we've got that kind of sat in between group who weren't eligible for McLeod, and they joined the 2008 scheme, and then they were forced into the 2015 scheme back in 2015. And then finally, we're also covering for the first time people who are 2015 only, and that's an increasing cohort, even amongst consultants, as some of the newer consultants. It started after 2015, and they've whizzed through training, and they've only been in the 2015 scheme. So as I said, It covers practitioners, so that's a GP, or officers, and so you can just use any of those from the previous four, an officer or practitioner. So this bit is important. So to give a reasonable estimate, it requires that you've been in the pension scheme continuously since April 2022 to now. And that's because if you haven't, you need a ton more data to work out what your position is. So if you've been in and out of the scheme in that period of time, this is not for you. And because you need, reams of data and your exact service history to be able to give an estimate, because of the very complicated pension rules about, best of three and counting back the time that you were in the scheme. So it's just an absolute impossibility. And then finally, do you want to have some videos? So if you click show videos, I think Andy and I did 14 videos the other night between us. So it's every bit of the modeler. If you want to, have somebody kind of hold your hand and talk you through that bit, if you click the show videos, it's all there for you. So I'm just going to have a drink. Pardon me. And I'm going to talk you through our first scenario, which is just going to be a consultant. And I'm going to take you as far as the completely free bit of the modeler. Okay, so to use the modeler, essentially, the vast majority of people are going to just need two documents. They're going to need a total reward statement, and you can get that really easily by just going onto ESR and clicking download pension statement. And that's a little snippet from two different pages of the TSR, and you're going to need a current payslip. So this one is a September one, but obviously October is out now, and you can choose whether you're using a September or October payslip. And as the year goes on, that will update with, as and when they're released. So the first bit is we're very simply going to tell it what our pensionable pay is for the last 3 completed tax years. So helpfully, that's on one page of the TRS. If you go to the Standard Benefits 2015 pensionable earnings statement, you'll be able to get your pay from those 3 years. So 1, 2 and 3 correspond to 1, 2 and 3 here. Now what your TRS doesn't know is what your work time equivalent was. So you're going to need to tell it. So if you're full time, 12 or more, 10 or more PAs, for example, for a consultant, 100%. If you're 8 PAs, for example, 80%, and so on and so forth. And you'll need to tell it that for each of the years. Next, you're going to need to tell it about your service. And so, pardon me, if you go to this page, which is the Standard Benefits TRS, and go to the Recordable Member part, you can see here this member's got 21 years, 147 days, and you simply transcribe that across 21, 147. Now, really importantly, the new TRS is a bit of an abomination. It's a very long document and everything's duplicated. So if you're McLeod eligible, you'll see standard benefits and you'll also see alternate benefits. And so you need to get the standard benefits. So these are the ones that's got the higher value for the service. For people that have got added years, and added years is supported for both hospital doctors and for GPs. If you've got an added years contract, you can put the information from the added years contract in here, work out the number of added days per year, put it in there, and it will work out your added year position. But we'll not complicate it for that at the moment. Now, pardon me, got a bit of COVID left, I think. Because many consultants will have taken industrial action in the 23-24 tax year, that can have a small effect on pension growth. And so to get a more accurate estimation, if you took disallowed days or industrial action days in 23-24 where you weren't paid, you can click yes, and then you can put 1, 2, 3, 4, however many days you weren't paid for in there, and it will make the relevant adjustments for those days. So that's the history bit. All has come very straightforwardly from a TRS. Now, for some people, because, for example, they've had arrears changed or they've had back pay misallocated into the wrong year, you can ask the scheme for something called an O5 service extract, and on that O5 service extract you'll see more up-to-date figures than are on your TRS, and so you can get those corresponding values to put in here, and that will give you an even more accurate estimation if you've been in one of those kind of special circumstances. So next we just need a payslip, and really straightforward. We just need two values from the payslip, 6 and 7. So it needs to be September or later for doctors in England, because the pay award was paid in August. So just copy those two values in there. So that's year-to-date pensionable and this period pensionable, and then it will calculate your estimated full year pay. Now, importantly, if between the month that you give it and the end of the tax year there's any further changes, so for example, if you've not had your back pay yet, so doctors in Northern Ireland, for example, and other doctors who, for example, are going to increment, then this payslip method isn't going to work. And so you'll have to kind of put in a manual estimate of what you think your actual pay is going to be and your work time equivalent pay is going to be. And again, you just need to give it a work time equivalent. So if you're full-time, 100%. And essentially, that's it to get an estimate completely free of what your pension growth is going to be. Now, the vast majority of people won't have had pension saving statements, and so I'll just change that back to no. And if you select no, then it will give you estimated growth based on the numbers that you've given. But if you are one of the lucky few who's received those statements, you can put in the values from the two schemes, and you can then ask whether or not you want the subsequent calculations to use your estimated values, or you can compare them with the official values. And you'll see here it changes from official to estimate. So that's the kind of the output, kind of like the end point of the completely free modeler. And so really nice little table. So what you can see is your service, you can see how your pension is built up, and these are kind of the TRS values for pension. Now, people who follow me on social media will know that I'm not a massive fan of the TRS. I think it's a really poor document. And one of the reasons it's poor is it's very difficult for people to actually understand what their position is, because the retirement date are completely different for the 2015 pension, which is state pension age, so that's going to be 67 or 68 or God knows whatever in the future in the 2015 scheme, and normal pension age in the 1995 scheme. So for most people that's going to be 60 unless you've got mental health officer or special class status. And so it's not that helpful to say, well, your pension is going to be that plus that, because it's not going to be that plus that, because they're kind of separated by 7 years. And also these values don't include any reductions for going early, because obviously you don't have to go at state pension age, for example, and for scheme pays if you've had AA charges. So that is where you'll get to on the completely free modeler. So you've got the kind of 2 missing years that most people haven't got PSSs for, and also the current year, really importantly, because that's the year that you can do something about. So I'm going to hand over to Andy, and Andy's just going to talk you through the same pay profile, but for a GP.
Okay, so for GPs, this really covers GP partners, it covers salaried GPs, or it covers locum GPs. So they are in what's called the practitioner scheme. And for the 2015 section of the scheme, it is exactly the same as hospital workers. But actually for the legacy 1995 and 2008 sections, it's slightly different. So the principle is really the same. We are looking to put in some earnings data, and the earnings data has to be your pensionable pay that applied for each of the years in question. Now, those impacted by McLeod, we're really just looking at anything post, from the 2022-23 year onwards. For those sections that weren't impacted by McLeod, those age groups that weren't, then you will be asked for a few further years worth of data going back to do the calculation. But it's similar, as Tony's just illustrated with the officer side, is you have to populate the boxes with the earnings. Now, for GPs, we all know, particularly in England, that's a real problem. Okay, so if you got your total reward statement or access to your My NHS pension benefits site, at best you will probably have data up to 2023-24. So you won't have anything beyond that. And at worst, you might not have anything. So what really, if you don't actually have any TRS information, what you need to try and do is populate these boxes based on the information you submitted to the pensions agency. So it has to include all your pensionable pay. So from your partnership, from your locum, from your out of hours, maybe if you've got an ICB post that's pensionable, you need to kind of add that in as well. If you're unsure, try and estimate it as best as possible. Now, this is a modeler, so estimates are great because this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to play around with figures. The other thing you need to put in is to try and estimate what in either 1995 or 2008 section you had built up in terms of pension at either 31st of March 2023 or 31st of March 2024. You're not likely to have 2025 yet, but it might be coming at some point. So one of those 2 years. Now, again, you can get that from your TRS, but if you don't have it, I guess you've just got to have a best guess, really, more than anything. Try and estimate it as best as possible. And again, the joy of the modeler, it allows you to change that. So, in this example, we got 50,000 estimated. Let's say we moved it to 40,000. I'm not saying you do it, Tony, so don't worry about it. But that could be 40,000, 60,000. If you just move those parameters, you can see further down how the annual allowance changes. So you can see actually how much to worry about it or how much not to worry about it. Again, for 2025-26, we have to estimate the potential earnings. So you're going to have a guide really to how that will work. Then by doing that, it will throw out a calculation for you. So it's slightly different to the consultant calculation, but it's throwing out basically the estimated growth outputs for 2023-24, 2024-25, and 2025-26 based on the figures that you have put in. I would stress at this point, it's an estimate, okay, because there are some peculiarities with the GP practitioner scheme that we don't have in the officer section. And one of it is to do with pre-GP earnings, which is covered by something called the flexibility value earnings credit, snappily titled adjustment. And to be able to model that at the moment was probably just a step too far in terms of data input. So we have excluded that. It will just mean that when you get the eventual pension savings statement, the figures for the 1995 and 2008 sections will be slightly different. Not hugely, but just with a modest difference. 2015 should be 100% accurate. So just to warn you on that. I would also just warn any GPs out there, if you've had more than 10 years service in the officer scheme, so pre-GP or been working again for an ICB or a CCG or PCT over the years, this model isn't probably going to work for you because it is really quite complicated when it comes to looking at your pensions. So just be worried about that. But most people, straightforward GP stuff, if you enter those 3 years worth of data and estimate for 2025-26, it is going to give you a pretty good idea of what your pension growth is going to be for those years in question.
Great. So I'll cover 2008 officer as well. But just before I do, just one little kind of cheat as well. If people are struggling to get to TRS and not all GPs can access TRS, and there's well-documented problems with the administrator for GP pensions. But if you've got an RPSS, that indirectly shows the values that you need. So if you've got an RPSS and it shows the closing value for your 1995 pension, you can divide that by 19, and then that value is your pension at the end of 2023. And similarly, if you're a GP in the 2008 scheme, you can use exactly the same method, but instead of dividing it by 19, divide it by 16. And similarly, if you've got a 23-24 PSS, which I know a lot of people haven't, you can do exactly the same and get that closing value in the 1995 section, and then you can use that to populate your estimate. So I'm just going to go to 2008. And I think of all the schemes, the kind of 2008 officer scheme is one of the schemes that causes the most confusion and upset because no one really understands it. Now, it's a really good scheme, but it's just got an additional level of complexity. So I'm going to talk you through that and just explain what the differences are. So this is a McLeod affected officer. in the 2008 schemes, exactly as before. We've got to give it those three values and tell it what our work time equivalent was. They're all on a TRS, so I've got the wrong scheme selected. So we've got those three values, 1, 2 and 3, but we're going to need to take the history back a little bit further and give it values going all the way back to 15, 16 to the 21, 22 tax year, and they're all on the alternate benefits 2015 pension earning statement. So you can get all of those figures and plug them in, and then that will help you get an estimate of that. So I'm just going to talk you through reckonable pay a little bit, because it's a bit of a nightmare, and I think it causes a bit of friction when younger consultants don't understand why they might have higher growth than their peers or much older consultants in the 1995 section. So the two kind of unique things of the 2008 section is that it's based on a 3-year average. Okay, so that instantly makes it just really difficult to kind of work out what's going on. So you're not looking at the change in pay between one year to the next. You're looking at a 3-year average. The next unique feature of it is that it's also got inflation protection for the previous 10 years. So you're looking for the best 3-year average in a 10-year period. So that makes it just impossible for kind of a mortal human to kind of compute whether or not it's a good or bad year by looking at kind of their growth in pay. So just to kind of illustrate that, using that same pay structure up here, on the top, it shows you the percentage change in your pay. And that's how 1995 pension works, essentially. It's your service and your pensionable pay. And because the service is closed now after 2022, it's the change in your pensionable pay. So, for example, for this particular member, they had very large growth because of the pay award and also an increment in 2024. So that 16% growth is going to cause a very, very large charge. But conversely, had that very same exact member been in the 2008 scheme, the pay had only gone up 6.7% because of the reckonable pay. Now, that's not to say that 2008 is always better than 1995. It's not at all, because of the higher accrual as well in the 2008. But it just means there's no obvious correlation. So if we just flip to the year before, in 2023, had this member been in the 1995 scheme, pay only went up 2.9%, so growth would have been low. But the same member with reckonable pay, it's gone up 9%. So 1 year much better, another year much worse. And if you want to understand the detail of it, and some people do want to understand these things, and other people are like, well, no, just tell me the answer. If you click max, and then it will show you how it's calculated that. So for example, here, if we go to the 24-25 pay, reckonable pay is actually being based on the 3-year average of 2019 to 2021 pay for this particular member because of that 3-year averaging and the 10-year look back. And this is why it just becomes impossible to try and predict what your pension growth is going to be. You just can't do it without some knowledge and a tool such as this to be able to do it accurately. And there are other free tools out there. So for example, NHS employers and First Actuarial have got a tool, and you can put 2008 in, but the 2008 section ignores this reckonable pay calculation. So you can see here, the difference between 2% and 9%, difference between 16 and 7%. It's pointless trying to do it based on just what last year's reckonable pay was and this year's pensionable pay is, because you'll get the completely wrong answer. And so again, that's trying to kind of close that gap and allow people in the 2008 scheme to estimate their growth and do so completely for free. This bit is all the same as it was for the other years. And then again, we come down here and we've got this really nice table that shows the service. You can also put in if you've come over in choice, and then you'll have a lump sum and get your pension growth for those years. So I'm just going to go back before we move on to the kind of premium parts of the modeler, and just going to switch it back to 1995 because large numbers of you have already kind of pre-registered for it, and the vast majority are officers, and the vast majority are in the 1995 scheme, as people might expect. But there are still many hundreds in the 2008 scheme, and hence originally I wasn't going to do it, but I've added it on. So this is where we kind of got to with the free modeler. Kind of also in the free modeler, just telling you how to kind of validate it. So you can check if you've got a TRS, you can check your pension figures against those tables, and if everything's gone in correctly, the pension value should be correct. And bear in mind, these pension values are calculated. You've not told it your pension, so that just kind of shows that all the numbers you've put in kind of correlate, because that 2015 pension in particular has been built up from your pay history. So moving onwards and upwards. So everything before now is the kind of free bit, and then these are part of the premium modeler. And for the premium modeler, you need to give it more information, because we are talking about the tapered annual allowance, and we're also talking about the 100k tax cliff, and for that you need to know taxable pay. So I'm going to get Andy to talk through taxable pay, because he's an expert in taxable pay, because he's an accountant, and and these three numbers are probably the most important numbers to get right on the modeler. And declaration of interest, I've had an accountant for the last decade, and I always get my accountant to tell me my threshold income, because it's so important to get the number right, and it's quite technical. But I'm going to get Andy to talk about the optional helper on the taxable pay section. So Andy, take it away and tell people how to calculate their taxable pay.
Yeah, so we're looking really at the sort of 200,000 barrier, but it also applies to the 100,000 barrier as well, for those affected by the loss of the personal allowance and loss of childcare allowances. But really what we need to do is work out all your taxable income. So the starting point is your NHS taxable income. Now, if you are got an employer post like a consultant, then it's the figure that comes off your P60. And in that situation, it will say taxable pay. So it's the bit that goes in your tax return, and that already deducts pension contributions. If you're a GP, it's going to be based on your taxable profits from either locum, partnership, and you have to physically then, sorry, not physically, but actually then need to deduct the pension contributions if you're self-employed, because where you're self-employed, again, the pension contributions are claimed somewhere else on the tax return. So for a salary GP, it's exactly the same as consultant, because that's just in your P60. But the self-employed GPs, you do need to deduct your pension contributions from your income. Then you need to add in other bits of income. Okay, so this also then factors in things like your rental income. So if you've got rental properties, it's the rental profits that you declare. If you have share dividends, it's dividends you receive, irrespective of the dividend allowance. Okay, so there is a bit of dividend allowance available to people, and that isn't, you ignore it for this purpose. If you receive £2,000 of dividends, you put £2,000 of dividends in. Bank interest, again, ignore the savings allowance that deals with the tax. You have to put the full interest in. So it's really a case of looking at basically all those other bits of taxable income you've got and put that into the modeler here. And then finally, if you're employed, you may well claim things like your subscriptions on your tax return, GMC, BMA, Royal College. If you don't do that and that's new to you, please do that. Another channel I work with, Medics Money, have got a great guide to take you through that, and do just free, just download it, follow that, get your tax back. But in this case, we've just got to put it in. Again, if you're self-employed, it's dealt with in your self-employed profits. But if you're employed, it will probably appear somewhere else in your tax return. So just include that as well. Okay. Just one final thing to watch out for: if you do have any salary sacrifice cars and things like that, you just do need to watch out for the benefit in kind that you potentially get for that, which is also taxable. So again, guidance there. And within the modeler, we've got a full video that deals with this for both employed people and self-employed people. So please do include that.
Yeah.
So calculate
Just
what your taxable pay is.
sorry, just say, Andy, the link to the Excellent Medics Money guide is there in 3. So people want to go out and just double check that they're claiming all their employment cost rebates. They can do that there. So this is a little kind of helper that will help you calculate that. So you just go through that kind of 4-step approach. Start off with your taxable pay from your payslip. Don't take off any pension contributions from your payslip because they've already been taken off. Add in your taxable income from any other source. Add in any employment costs you're claiming back via your tax return, and then that will give you the taxable income to enter above. And so once you've kind of completed this table, you can just click these 3 boxes, I'm content, use these values, and then that will copy them up to the table above. Now, at the moment, we've only talked about a fully self-service modeler, but we're hoping to introduce as early as next week, starting with just officers, hospital doctors in England, because of the paperwork, a concierge service where people can pay an additional fee, they can send in some documents, and then that will pre-populate the modeler for them. So with a self-service modeler, obviously there's a kind of a limit to just how much people can kind of put in. But with the concierge stuff, there's some additional numbers that we can get in. So for example, this automatically pulls through all your pensionable gross, your taxable, your contributions. It does that calculation of work time equivalents for you from your pay slips, because that's a really important number to get right, because if you don't get your work time equivalent right, then all your taxable pay is wrong. We see that as a common issue for problems with people's pension growth from the scheme. So that will, I'll show you very briefly at the end how the concierge service is going to work when that's launched. But then that will take these taxable pays. It will also calculate a predicted taxable pay for the current 25-26 tax year based on the year to date. It will put that up there. Then you can just add in your additional income and take it forward. So we've got our taxable pays, as I said, super important boxes. We then just need to tell it whether or not we're contributing towards a private pension, and more on private pensions later. And then another crucially important bit of the modeler is carry forward. Now, as I said, people will have needed to complete the 22-23 tax year, which is part of the RPSS process, to do this properly. And most people now are using an accountant for that, and they will give you, or they should give you, a value for carry forward at the end of that process, if you've got any carry forward left. So if, like me, you had a charge in 22-23, it's very easy, your carry forward is 0 because you had a charge in 22-23. But if you didn't have a charge, you should have some carry forward, and you can put that value in there. Now, this is where it gets a bit more complicated, because if you do have carry forward, the modeler won't know which year that carry forward came from. So if you do have carry forward, what you need to do is click out to the HMRC carry forward calculator and put your values in, and then on the output screen on the HMRC calculator it says unused pension allowance for the relevant years, and then you can copy those across to here. So it will do it automatically based on the figures that you put in. But if the carry forward drops off because it's from a previous year, the calculator won't know that. And the reason we've done that approach is the alternative approach is asking for all of your RPSS data. So that's all your earnings data, all your growth data going back to 2010. And lots of you will already have grey hair from having gone through that process once. So to make the modeler more straightforward and capitalise on the fact that most people have had accountants do the process properly for them, you can put that value in, but then just check it with the carry forward calculator. Now, it's currently asking for marginal rates, but the marginal rate analysis has moved on a lot since this page was done originally, so that probably is going to go and be done automatically for you. But it's the vast majority of people who pay annual allowance charges in England, Northern Ireland and Wales, usually their income is above the additional rate threshold, so the annual allowance charge, if there is any, is at 45%. Obviously, it's higher than that in Scotland because they've got the top rate of tax there, so those charges will be slightly higher. But that bit is probably going to go because the marginal rate analysis is in much more detail later on. So we've gone through taxable pay and the importance of getting that right, and now we're going to move on to the output. So I'll cover this output screen, and then I'll get Andy to cover the other output screen. So this is just a really nice view that kind of shows you an overview of your position. So you can see crucially your threshold income, you can see your adjusted income, you can see whether or not you've got a general unreduced annual allowance, as is the case here, or whether it's tapered, as is the case down here for this member in that last tax year. And you can see whether or not there's a tax charge and what that charge is. And then if there is a charge, you can see what the scheme pays split should be. And that's not a recommendation to use scheme pays. It's just saying if you choose to use scheme pays, that's the splits that you can put on your forms. But unlike a kind of fixed pension report or whatever that people get, the beauty of this is people can see, well, what if I change my income? What's going to happen to my tax charge? And so the idea is it's dynamic because this year isn't closed. This is a year that you can do something about. We want people to kind of explore, well, what happens if I change my taxable income? What happens if I look at a SIPP? But more on that on the full tapering analysis later. Andy, do you just want to talk through this form? Because this is kind of a very accountancy looking form.
Can you make it a bit bigger for me, Tony?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. Your eyes.
It's Sunday evening and I'm old. So yeah, this is a bit more, again, it's more data. It's showing us particularly, again, the pay that you've got in. So it's a bit before, it's got the growth in, but we've also got the annual allowance and tapering calculations there. So can you just scroll down slightly so I just can see all that table? Thank you, Tony. That's brilliant. So we've got, just example, in the first year, which is 23-24, we've got the taxable income. It's below the 200,000 test. So that's great. So we've got the full allowance available to us. We can compare that with the growth. In this case, we actually haven't got any growth because that year in question, we've got some useful offset in that the 1995 section didn't actually grow at all. So we've actually got negative growth. So that's deemed as zero. So actually, we don't have any excess taxable. We've got no tax charge. Second year, 24-25, income's gone up, but we're still below that 200,000 level. So again, for that year in question, we're going to get a further 60,000 allowance because we can then add in the unused allowance we've got carried forward. And let's just think this example, it's just looking at the previous year, that 60 has gone to 120,000. And even though we've got a very large sizable growth figure of 107,000, it's still below the growth allowances available to you. So we don't have a tax charge and we don't have any money to pay to HMRC. But when we go to the third year, 25-26, we've now gone over the 200,000 threshold. And as Tony's just shown, he's actually just changed the figure there. So we were using 201,000 in the example, but actually because he's played around with the modeler, he's shifted it to 208,000. It then calculates what the in-year annual allowance available is to you. It's calculated what the growth is going to be if you earn that kind of income. Okay, it's looked at the carry forward, and this time around it's chucked out a tax charge. Okay, and it's chucked out a tax charge based on your marginal rate at 45%. And also what it will also do is give you an indicative scheme pay split. So you do have the option of to get the scheme to pay. This is not financial advice. We cannot tell you what to do. So please don't put any questions going which one's the best option because we can't answer that. But it'll just give you the split between the old legacy and 2015 sections. So it will chuck out the tax charge. And then if we go back to the modelling bit, that's the bit we can play around with. So just for example, Tony, can you just drop that below 200,000 out of curiosity and see what happens? So just remember, we've got a 20,000 charge.
Yeah.
Or are you going to come on to that?
Yeah, I was going to come on to that on that next bit, but yeah, if we just go just south of it, So there you are, 198, and then we can see that charge has come down to 10,000. So,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what this next section is on. So that segues really nicely into it. So I'm just going to zoom in to this graph. So this is a graph that I did a year ago as a bit of a political stunt. It unashamedly copies the style of a graph from the IFS, where they used a very similar graph to show the dreadful effect of the 100k tax cliff. And so what this did is it looked at, I think, a year 13 consultant, and who then incremented during that tax year to year 14. And year 14 was one of the ones, because of the new design of the pay scales, that did particularly well out of the pay deal in terms of pay growth, but then of course particularly badly because of that in terms of an annual allowance charge. And so what this shows is that you've got income on the x-axis. On the green line, this is after tax and national insurance, and then the yellow, this drop here, is what your annual allowance tax charge is. And because it's a cliff, you go 1 penny over £200,000 income, threshold income, it just drops off. So you can then draw a line horizontally across from that peak. And for this member in this tax year, this member is better off earning just under the threshold, all the way up to 242,000. So let that sink in, because it's absolutely obscene and ridiculous. This person earning anywhere between 200 and 242,000 pounds is worse off than they were earning 199, and that is just a completely messed up feature of the tax system. And I've told that to the chap who's writing the budget for Rachel Reeves, and to the IFS, and to anyone else who will listen. It's a very badly designed tax, because no one should ever be paying to work, essentially. You shouldn't do more work and be paid less, because that's obscene. But the problem with this graph is that this was great for political pressure, which is why I did it, but this doesn't help the individual, because it's very unique to, it depends exactly what their growth is, and people need to know their own numbers to know how it's going to affect them. So if we scroll up here, this is that graph, but for this individual. Now we've changed this person's income quite a few times already on this webinar, so let's just arbitrarily call it 212,900, and we can see at 212,900 they've got a tax charge of £21,000, and this line here is where they are on the graph. So you can see here that yellow line, the same as the IFS style one underneath. There is a triangle here where they are worse off, and for this individual it's all the way up to 224,000, 224,500. They are worse off. Their net position is worse off than earning just beneath that. So this is a really powerful tool, so people can see what the level of that cliff drop is. So for this individual, that cliff drop is 8,054, and that's represented on this table. So you can see if their income is below 199,999, their tax charge is 10,486 in this year with these figures that have been provided. If they just go 1 penny over the taper, for this member in this year, it goes from 10 to 18. So the taper cliff impact, I've called it, is 8,054. And then there's this kind of period of very high marginal rate, which I've called the kind of period of highest effective marginal rate. For this individual, it's between 200 and 264. And it's only when they kind of go the other side of 264 that their marginal rate comes down again, because they're fully tapered and there's no more loss of that taper allowance. So it's just a really powerful tool to help people kind of look in year at exactly what their position is and what they can do to mitigate it. So, for example, this member, if we're going to stick this income with 212,900, if you go up to the initial section, because it did flag, you've got some options. So if this is 212,900, it says here that if you keep your pensional pay the same, and most people do keep their pensionable pay. It's usually the variable components, the usual things like waiting list initiatives, private practice, etc. So it says that for this individual, if they decrease their income by 13,900, that just gives a bit of a buffer to bring it down to 199, so you're not caught out by bank interest or smaller things that might cause you just to trip over that you forgot about, then your net position is better by £3,000. I mean, that's just nuts, isn't it? So this person's predicted to be 212,900 by doing roughly the same amount of additional work than last year. So this is just kind of the pay growth. Then if they keep the status quo, then they're going to be considerably worse off than by doing something about it. So that's one strategy, and so it just kind of suggests that to you there, that you might just want to consider looking at your income. Conversely, another strategy is you can lower your threshold income by contributing towards a SIPP. Okay, now I know that sounds really stupid, because the reason you've got a tax charge is because you've got high deemed growth, and so it seems illogical and counterintuitive to pay into a pension when you've got a problem with your pension growth. But for example, if this person put 13,900 into a SIPP, that brings that below to 199, and then they've decreased their liability by 21,000 to 16,000, and we'll talk about the numbers in a SIPP in the next section. So again, just a really powerful tool just to kind of help you as an individual kind of blot out the noise from everyone else about, oh, I can't do that, it's going to give me a much bigger tax charge, to look at your numbers in this tax year and try and make an informed decision. So I've covered the tapering bit, Andy. I need a sip of Diet Coke, so I will let you talk about the 100k tax trap. And I think GPs and consultants often find, from junior to senior consultants, they're kind of caught in that band between these two productivity destroyers. So you've got some people, who are newer consultants wanting to stay under the 100k tax trap, and then you might have, more senior people, often in procedural specialties, that are really important for waiting lists, etc., at the higher end of the earning spectrum. And so you've got two things that are just destroying NHS productivity. So Andy, we'll bring this a bit more down to earth. In fact, I think we've got one ready-made, haven't we, with a lower one for the SIPP. So I'll let you talk through the one that we'd got ready-made.
Okay, so we're very conscious that actually, not everyone owns 200,000, but a lot of people do own above 100,000, and particularly the problem there is once you start to go over that 100,000 threshold, you are starting to lose the tax-free personal allowance. So for every £2 you earn above 100,000, you lose £1 of tax-free personal allowance. So it gives you an effective margin rate of 60%. And if you're in Scotland, it's even higher, because the Scottish rates are higher at that level. You also have to pay 2% national insurance. You also have to pay potentially student loan, because we realise that a lot of people in this category also have student loan issues. And then the final big issue is tax-free childcare. So if you are utilising any sort of childcare allowances that the government now give, again, if one member of your household goes above that 100,000 limit, you lose it entirely. Okay, so we've got lots of different dynamics going on which are beginning to affect people. And I saw a really interesting tweet by someone who should know better around just saying that, if you go above 100,000, you have to pay 60% tax. You're keeping 40%. Why don't you carry on working? They were just talking generally. It's just like, you're missing the point here. There's so many other dynamics that are going on affecting people. So what we've done in the modeler, again, is to give you the ability to play around with that, because we are quite frequently asked the question, or certainly I'm quite frequently asked the question, how can we get below my 100,000 level? It's just really critical for us as a family at the moment. So again, what we can do is we can play around with the income. And at the moment, as it's set, we've got someone here with a student loan and we can put the different student loan type in, and they've got total childcare amounts being paid out of 12,000, but 5,000 is actually the effect of the government allowances, because they're just paying extra for their childcare. So we've got two different figures in there. As Tony's just shown, you can toggle for Scottish tax as well. So it will work Scottish tax, but we don't want to upset people on a Sunday evening too much. Halloween was a few nights ago. This is getting really worse. So what it will do is it will show you, by playing around with the income level, what your marginal rate of tax is. So in this scenario here, we've got someone at 97,000 with a student loan. Actually, for every £100 they earn, it's 51%. They go over that 100,000 barrier, wham, up to 71%. Okay, so it goes quite a sizable impact there. Two ways to get below 100,000. Well, three ways to get below 100,000. One is earn less, so that back to that whole chestnut of earning less. But the second way is again looking at paying into a SIPP, which we'll come on to in a second. And the third way is actually gift aid. Gift aid for this barrier comes into play. It doesn't with the tapered annual allowance issue, but it does with the 100,000 trap. So you can make gift aid contributions, and gift aid contributions will hopefully, can bring you below that. Now, just a little trick with gift aid: if you just go over 100,000 and you just miss getting the opportunity to correct this, with gift aid and gift aid alone, actually what you can do is carry back what you pay in 2026-27 into 25-26, so you can get below the barrier there. So Tony's just put some gift aid in there. So despite being over the 100,000 barrier, actually we've kept below the 100,000 barrier because of the gift aid. So our marginal rate's still at 51%, and we get all our childcare back. As we said as well, then the other option is to do a SIPP, and then where this modeler comes into play usefully is, a lot of people have said, well, what's the headroom? What's my headroom for making a SIPP? I know I'm using up some of my annual allowance in terms of the NHS side of things, but I don't know what I've got left to put into a SIPP. So this calculator will give you an indicative amount. So it will calculate your available growth that available allowances you've got carried forward, take off your NHS growth, and it gives you the headroom for making the SIPP. Now, you can go above that headroom, so you can pay more in. Again, it sounds a bit, counterproductive doing that, because you're going to create yourself an annual allowance charge. But it could be one of those methodologies of getting below 100,000, and that's really probably only really so relevant really for those with the childcare issue going on. So we'll work out, the modeler works out the net pay, the net take-home pay for you. Just a quick slight warning on this, again, just with any sort of module like this, trying to build in every nuance of the tax system into a model is impossible. So it just assumes that all the income is taxable at normal rates, whereas your dividends and savings allowance may change things slightly, but it's not going to change things significantly. Also in the GP side, which we're not going to show you, but there is the option of self-employed versus employed, because that just has an effect in terms of the national insurance that you get paid. But the modeler will just give you an idea of the indicative amount. So again, it allows you to flex that income, and you can see what the impact of maybe doing those extra sessions as a GP is, maybe doing some extra overtime in hospital. So it allows you to play with it. And as we've said before, this is the in-year. This is the bit you can change. This is the bit you can play with. And this is the bit actually it's quite difficult to do, in any other modeler without going to a full-blown modeler that covers all the years in question.
Yeah, and just on the SIPP, it will show you what the 2,000 that I put in there is the gross cost. So to buy 2,000 of SIPP, you pay a SIPP provider 1,600, the government pay the 20%, and then you claim back the rest via your tax return. So the effective cost is as low as £960 for this member in England. But you can change it for Scotland, and the saving will be it'd be different in there because the different rates of tax and therefore tax relief. But importantly, because it's done your headroom, and that's the bit that's really important. So if I change that to 20,000, but I only had 6,000 of headroom, it's pointing out to you, you've got a red warning, your SIPP is in excess of your headroom by £13,000, so you're not going to be getting it for this 11,000 rate, because on top of that you're going to be paying an annual allowance charge on the bit that's over. So that's a kind of a whistle stop tour of the modeler, or at least the main features of it. So once we are live, if you want to look at the more advanced features, you'll come to this form. Very straightforward. You just give it your name. You give it your email address twice, because it's going to be locked to your email. So it's for your personal, non-commercial use, and it will be locked to your email. And linked to that email is going to be your scheme reference number. And your scheme reference number is on an ESR payslip. It's on a total reward statement. It's on a pension savings statement, and it's the same. Should be the same number on all three types of documents. So give it your email address twice. Give it your scheme reference number, and then if you want to purchase the gold or the silver modelers, they're £75 or £100 plus VAT. So essentially, the silver modeler is everything obviously that's already in the free modeler, plus the 100k tax cliff, marginal rate analysis, loss of tax-free childcare, and of course all the annual allowance calculations and the tapering calculations. And then the gold modeler just adds that much more in-depth look at the tapered annual allowance. Now, making all of this stuff is not free on my time or costs. I've got several thousands of pounds of IT costs now in the background to support all of this. And so if you don't want to purchase the free modeler, but you do just want to support the project, there is a kind of bronze modeler supporter option as well for £25 plus VAT, which would be appreciated just to help towards the support costs for getting all of this tested, validated, costs, etc. Now, we're hoping to be launching at the same time a concierge service, and the concierge service basically means that you don't need to put in all the numbers, because it will be done for you. And that is an add-on service that can be with a free modeler. So if you just want to know your growth, but you want to get it right and get all of the everything put in automatically, or you can add it on with one of the premium, either the gold or the silver. And if you click the concierge, it will just add on all of the extra bits. There's a video that will explain how to do it. Most of this has been written by my daughter, Shoshi, for which we're very grateful. And it's super straightforward. So you basically just need to download your documents from ESR, and it will take your payslips from March 23, March 24, March 25, and the current payslip. That literally takes 20 seconds to download. You just go to the relevant bit of ESR and you do the scheme year, March, download, and then next year, March, download. It takes no time at all. Drag and drop them here, and then they will be uploaded for the data extraction. So that's step one. That's mandatory. Step two is a total reward statement. Now, to start with, because they've got kind of stable documents, we're starting the service in England for people that have got a total reward statement and people that have got pay slips, which hopefully ESR pay slips, which is the vast majority of people. We will expand it to the other nations, but they're just kind of in a period of flux at the moment. So Scotland have just got new style documents, etc., on their new portal. So that's going to come down the road, but it will come at some point in the future. And so again, super simple to download your TRS from ESR. Some people don't have TRS on ESR because it's just another administration disaster from the current scheme. And so if you don't have it, unfortunately, you can't use the concierge service. You're just going to have to kind of guess your service and the other bits that come from there, and use more payslips, etc. And then finally, and so you just drag and drop that in here. And then finally, if you have one of these rare pieces of paper called a 23-24 pension saving statement or a 24-25 pension saving statement. If you can get a PDF copy of them, so not a scanned copy, scanned copies don't work. It can only be an original PDF emailed from the scheme. So if you've got your paper one, just ask them to email them, drag and drop them in here, make your payment at the top, and drop it in there, and all is good. So in terms of release, we've got this sign up document here. You can use the QR code to join the queue. Rather more people than I expected and our IT supplier expected have signed up already, and they've asked us to therefore release it in tranches. And so hopefully, as of this Wednesday, if we get the final approval from our IT provider, we will be sending out links to those people who've already pre-registered. So I would strongly advise, if you haven't pre-registered, get yourself in the queue by going to this URL, bit.ly/GPFT interest. There's no obligation at all. And as I said, there's no obligation to buy anything. If people just want to use the free tool and stop at just the pension growth, that's absolutely fine. I've done a free tool for the last 10 years that basically does similar but not as much as this, and that's going to be there for people. But if you want to do the premium things, those options will be there as well. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the modeler. We're probably a little bit over time, but should we just answer a couple of questions, Andy? You've probably been keeping...
Do you want me to shout them out? I'll shout them out, and then we can answer them together. So, will the modeler work if I was at a career break for a certain period of time since 2022, but paid fully privately into the NHS pension scheme during that time?
Don't
think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you'll have kind of all the kind of relevant documents, but I suspect not. So it is intended for people that have been fully in the scheme since 2022, and if this kind of been out of it for any reason, that is just going to complicate things. So I suspect for kind of very unique special circumstances like that, I suspect not.
Yeah. From who do I request my added years contract from? Trust Pension Agency?
Yeah,
I suspect the pensions agency, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you want your added years contract, you can simply go in the modeler, click the show help, and in there is the option to request an 05 service and pay extract. And so if you click that link, it will just open up a template, and then you can send it off, and you'll get an 05 service and pay extract, and then this little bit here is an extract from the 05 service and pay extract. That's the situation in England and Wales. I think in Scotland, added years are on your benefit statements, but I don't think I've actually seen the new style benefit statements since. People have complained to me actually that I think added years used to be on them, but there's no added years currently on the new Scottish kind of engage ones. So that'll be an inquiry to the scheme, I would have thought.
Yeah. Is the modeler any use for those who partially retired, drawn down the 1995 pension, but still members paying into the 2015 pension scheme? Absolutely, yes, I'd say.
Yeah, it is.
2015 only.
Exactly. So for people, if you've taken all of your 1995 pension and none of your 2015 pension and your 2015 only, then absolutely you can do that. You obviously need to include your pension income on top of your pay-as-you-earn income if you retire and retired. What we have said in the small print of the modeler is that this is not for people who are retiring at any period during these years, because there are special rules and exceptions, and obviously things like actuarial reduction impact on annual allowance if you're retiring in the middle of a tax year. So if people are retiring during the period covered by the modeler, particularly the retirement year is not covered. That's a much more detailed piece of work. But if you just want to model your 2015 only growth, then absolutely make sure your taxable income includes both your pay income and your pension income.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just worth reiterating, this model doesn't replace the need for those that do need to take financial advice going to a medical specialist advisor, be it your accountant or financial advisor. This is really just to deal, hopefully, with the ideas around growth and how that affects you mid-year.
Correct.
I love this one. It's not a question, this, but I'm going to read it out because this is the power of positive thinking. So for years, my TRS pension data was always unavailable on ESR. We can't calculate it. Contact your employer, etc., etc. I've tried this for the last few years and gave up. Just check now, and it's available. There you
Wow.
go. You come on you come on a
Yeah.
YouTube, and it all gets sorted. That's
Yeah.
I suspect it's nothing to do with us, but I'm going to take some credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that's not a universal position. There are hundreds of thousands, sadly, that haven't got the TRS. And part of the reason that I've kind of done all the stuff that I've done around pensions over the last kind of 8 or 9 years is it's all just a bloody mess. It's just horrendous for people, and how people can kind of try and plan and make sensible decisions when some of them haven't got data for the last 10 years. That's a matter for the regulator to sort out. And I do feel a bit sorry for the pensions agencies, because the bottom line is they're under-resourced. And so it's a very complicated scheme. It's been made much more complicated by McLeod. And to deliver that for the biggest defined benefit pension scheme in the UK and in Europe, then you need to properly resource that, and you also need the expertise. And I think there's been a bit of a brain drain of expertise, and they don't have enough specialist expertise, particularly around annual allowance in the scheme, and that's impacting on the service for everyone. So the government needs to spend a bit more money on admin. And the bottom line is the government do spend a lot of money on our pensions. It is a good pension scheme, and if I was Wes and Rachel and I was spending as much money as I am on the pension scheme, I would probably say that the 0.08% that they're spending on admin is too little. And if it was maybe 0.12% of pensionable pay, it's a very tiny amount in the general scheme of things in terms of how much the scheme costs. When 8, 9, 10% is going back to Treasury every year anyway as a surplus. Why not spend a tiny bit more and have people a little bit happier about their pensions? Because I think obviously I still get lots of noise in the system about how terrible the taper is and the 100k tax trap and annual allowance is a pain in the arse, and I agree with all of those things. And I'll carry on trying to put pressure with BMA colleagues and people like Andy and Aisma and all the work that people have done to try and put pressure on the Treasury and the government to take action about all of those things. But the admin thing seems like such an easy thing to fix if they just put a bit more resource and had a bit more specialism in there, and people will feel a lot happier about their pension, even if they're not happy about paying annual allowance.
So the final question, and then we will draw it to close. And can the concierge service manage things like maternity leave and changing PAs mid-year?
Changing PAs mid-year is something that we wouldn't be able to do from just those pay slips, and we would need an 05 service and pay extract. So that's probably a future development. I mean, if you go onto that the sign up page, I'm not sure that video is there anymore, but you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see some other things that are in the development pipeline that are kind of full pension modelling tools that use the 05 service and pay extract data as an input, and then that definitely can deal with those things. I think doing things just from pay slips, it's a lot more challenging to cover those special circumstances. So I'm afraid not. Is probably the answer at the moment. But the concierge service is something that definitely is going to be developed with kind of other nations and other circumstances as well going forward. We also didn't want to be too reliant on things like the 05 service and pay extract. The scheme unilaterally withdrew that right before the RPSS process, which was a crazy and stupid thing to do, and it's kind of come back in a lesser form than all the data that it had on previously, and for various reasons. So that's kind of why we're trying to use a variety of documents that they're not allowed to stop. By law they have to send you an annual benefit statement. By law they have to send you a payslip. And so that's why we're trying to do as much as we can from payslips, and also to allow people to do it entirely on their own.
Okay, so just a couple of quick ones that's come in. Would any of the paid options be suitable if you have a period of opted out service up to April 2022? I think you covered that right at the beginning. No, unfortunately, the complexities around that are too difficult just to build into, a model that's trying to, cover as many people as possible. And then the final thing, any thoughts about what might happen in the budget? Well, I can describe this on a podcast I did the other day. This budget round has been, it's a bit worse than Christmas decorations appearing in shops. The budget speculation started earlier this year than the Christmas decorations appearing. And it's going to continue for the next 24 days until we find out what's going to happen. No idea what's going to happen. Multitude of things could happen. I suspect we'll all end up paying a bit more tax. Most definitely will happen. But beyond that, I don't think we can speculate on anything.
Yeah.
What we would say again with the modeler is, the model is based on the current tax rules, and the useful thing of how it's been designed now is that if things do change, then hopefully in the background the calculations can be updated, but hopefully it's not going to be too bad in terms of updating calculations, because I know how difficult it is to update the modeler in the background.
So just to pick on both those points, Andy, because I think they're both relevant. So if the person is 1995 and they opted out only prior to 2022 and they've had continuous service since then it's fine to use the modeler, because their annual benefit statement, their TRS, will cover their position up until the end of the remedy period, and then so that will be fine. It just won't cover it for people that have had any opt-out periods after April 2022. On the budget thing, look, it's really difficult, isn't it? If I was a betting man like Andy, I think there's been even more kind of kite flying than there is normally, and even ministers being on the record talking about people with broad shoulders, etc. I think there probably is a bit more pain coming our way. But in terms of kind of making very important decisions like when to retire, I definitely, you can only do things based on the current rules. And lots of people came unstuck because, for example, the tax-free lump sum rumour, I've been very, very involved in pensions for 10 years or so. I think every year the tax-free lump sum rumour is there in certain aspects of the media, and if everyone kind of took action on it, then you may find that if you crystallise your pension, you've taken your lump sum, you can't kind of undo those things. So don't do things based on rumours. But as Andy said, the beauty of the kind of the modeler in this format, where you can save as many scenarios as you want, they email back to yourself, you can come back to them, you can revisit them later in the tax year. So for example, if I was thinking about making a SIPP, would I be doing it before the budget? Absolutely not. But do I want to revisit that when I've got a February payslip, or even a March payslip, because there's a short gap between when the March payslip is produced and the end of the tax year? That's the beauty of a model like this, is you can just kind of keep on coming back to it, and if the tax rules change this tax year, then the modeler will be updated. And there are a couple of precedents for changing things at a budget during the tax year. I think it would be very difficult with pension tax, but it was done in the 15-16 mini tax year situation, for example. But don't act on rumours, guys. You can only plan on what the current law is today. Well, thank you very much for coming, everyone. I'm just going to end on that final screen. As I said, it's a queue. It's a very long queue. Our IT supplier doesn't want everyone in the queue to get it at the same time, so as to not cause smoke coming out of their servers. So they are going to be sent out in batches, probably as early as Wednesday. So I would strongly advise you to join the queue if you want to get the free modeler, or if you want to think about any of the premium or concierge modelers as well. And the concierge service, we're going to kind of start it off slowly. We may have to only sell so many units, and then kind of have a queue for that as well, so we don't overwhelm the team that are working on that. That's great. So thank you very much for coming, everyone. Please do pre-register, and we will keep you posted. Thank you.
Yep, thanks very much.